Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Nicole Harris's laughter slipped through the thin crack of the front door, bright and careless. Jerome Harris's hand froze on the knob, his palms still dusted white with concrete from the construction site. He leaned closer without meaning to, the weight of his tool belt dragging at his hips, and a single sentence cut through the air. "Honestly, his presence irritates me," Nicole said, her voice low and intimate. "I wish he would just disappear forever so I can finally be with you." The words slammed into Jerome harder than any beam he had ever lifted. His breath caught halfway in his chest as if someone had slammed a door inside him. He did not move. On the other side of the door, Nicole's tones softened into a giggle, light and playful, the kind of sound he had not heard directed at him in years. "You do not understand, Marcus," she went on, naming a man Jerome had only heard mentioned in passing. "You make him look so small. He is good at hauling things and fixing things, but you make me feel alive. He just makes me tired." Jerome felt something in his rib cage tighten until it hurt. The woman he had married 5 years earlier, the woman he had once watched fall asleep on his shoulder on a bus ride through Atlanta, was now laughing about how much she wanted him gone. Nicole lowered her voice, but the words still cut through the wood. "He does not even realize how small he is next to you," she whispered. "Every time he walks into a room, I feel like the air gets heavy. I want him to vanish, Marcus. I want him to disappear so we can finally be together the way we are meant to be." She laughed again, softer this time. "You said you wished he would get out of the way. Trust me, I do too." Jerome did not hear every reply from the other end of the call, but he caught enough, a deep voice promising, "Be patient," and "We will figure it out," phrases wrapped in confidence and money and a life Jerome knew he could never afford. The call ended with a faint, lingering "I love you" from Nicole, followed by a sigh and the clink of glass on wood. Only then did Jerome turn the knob. The door creaked open. Nicole sat curled on the couch in their small Houston living room, legs tucked beneath her in gray leggings and an oversized sweater. Her phone lay face down on the cushion beside her, and a half-full glass of red wine sat next to a glossy magazine on the coffee table. She looked up quickly, her expression smoothing into practiced ease, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You are home early," Nicole said. "I thought your crew was working late." "Job wrapped sooner than I expected," Jerome said. His voice was steady, shock already sinking below the surface. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and set his metal lunch pail gently on the counter. As he shrugged off his worn denim jacket and hung it on the hook by the door, every movement felt slow and deliberate, like he was acting out a life that no longer belonged to him. The living room smelled faintly of Nicole's perfume, the expensive bottle she had insisted she got on sale, though he had seen the exact same brand in a magazine ad with a price that equaled a week's groceries. Nicole reached for her wine glass casually, as though nothing had happened in the past few minutes. "You look tired," she said, taking a small sip. "Everything all right at the site?" Jerome lowered himself into his usual chair, the old recliner that had molded to his shape over years of late-night news and sore muscles. He rested his calloused hands on his knees. "Work is work," Jerome replied. He held her gaze just long enough to memorize the relaxed curve of her jaw, the way her eyes did not flicker with even a flicker of guilt. The clock on the wall ticked steadily behind her, each second hammering into him like nails driven into wood. He did not ask who she had been talking to. He did not ask why she wished him gone. He did not ask why his presence, the same presence that had fixed broken pipes, changed tires at midnight, and paid medical bills on time, now irritated her so much she wanted him erased. Instead, Jerome sat in silence and let the bitterness sink deep where she could not see it. Inside, the man she had just called small was no longer bleeding. He was measuring. Her words, meant as an insult, had become something else in his mind, an instruction. She wanted him gone. She wanted him to disappear. He turned the idea over like a brick in his hand and understood that disappearing did not always mean dying. Sometimes it meant walking away, so completely that a person was forced to live with the hollow echo of their own wish. The next 3 days passed under a thin film of quiet. Jerome moved through the house like a shadow, predictable and polite. He brewed coffee in the morning, packed his lunch, and headed to the construction site before sunrise. When he came home, he carried in groceries, brought in the mail, repaired the loose cabinet door that had been annoying her for weeks. He kissed her cheek when she walked past him, felt her skin cool and distant against his lips, and said nothing. Nicole moved as if the foundation of their marriage had not cracked. She chatted about a new restaurant in Midtown, a colleague's promotion, a new dress she had ordered online. She laughed at videos on her phone in bed at night, the blue glow reflecting off her face. On the third night, Nicole cooked pasta and poured herself another smooth glass of red wine. The overhead light in the dining room cast a warm amber glow over the table. Jerome sat across from her, turning his fork slowly, his mind far from the steaming plate in front of him. Nicole stared at her glass for a moment, as if rehearsing lines, then set it down with an air of careful casualness. "I've been thinking," Nicole said, stirring her pasta with slow circles. "I need some time for myself. A break. A solo vacation. Just a few weeks to reset and rediscover who I am." Jerome lifted his eyes from his plate. "How long?" Jerome asked. Nicole leaned back, shrugging lightly. 3 weeks, Nicole answered quickly, as if she had already memorized the number. "I found this retreat package, beachfront resort, morning yoga, quiet afternoons. There are photos of hammocks and white sand and private cabanas. I could use that kind of peace. Time to figure out what I really want." The fork in Jerome's hand rested against the rim of the plate. He chewed the bite in his mouth slowly, swallowed, and wiped his face with a napkin. "If that is what you want," Jerome said, tone neutral. Nicole studied his face carefully, searching for resistance. She seemed to expect an argument, a plea, maybe even a demand. When none came, her shoulders loosened. A subtle smile touched her mouth. "I knew you would understand," Nicole said softly. "You always do." Jerome nodded and took another bite. After dinner, he rinsed his plate, set it in the sink, and excused himself. In the bathroom, the shower water pounded against his skin, hot and relentless, but could not wash away the memory of her laughter on the phone or the wish she had spoken so clearly. Under the water, his chest ached, but under that ache, something harder formed, resolve, clean and sharp. The week before her trip moved like a sequence of rehearsed scenes. Nicole hummed as she packed new clothes into a hardshell suitcase she had ordered 2 days earlier. Shopping bags lined the bedroom wall. Swimsuits, sundresses, sandals that had never touched pavement. "Do you think this color looks good on me?" Nicole asked once, holding a dress against her. Jerome glanced up from the pair of work jeans he was folding. "You look good in whatever you wear," Jerome said, and returned to his task. He carried her luggage downstairs when she waved a hand at it, loaded it into the trunk of the silver sedan he had bought for her on their 3rd anniversary, and drove without complaint when she said her flight was early. The morning they left for the airport, the sky over Houston was the color of wet concrete. Jerome drove with both hands steady on the wheel, the highway stretching ahead in long gray lanes. Nicole sat in the passenger seat with her earbuds in, scrolling through her phone. Her new luggage lay stacked in the back seat, tag loops already printed with her name and address. She tapped her foot in time with a pop song only she could hear. "I might not answer every call," Nicole said suddenly, pulling one earbud out. "You know how retreats are about disconnecting." Jerome kept his eyes on the road. "Do what you need to do," Jerome replied. At the terminal drop-off, the air was filled with rolling suitcases, overlapping voices, and the steady murmur of announcements. Jerome lifted her suitcases onto the curb one by one. Nicole smoothed her braids, adjusted her sunglasses, and turned to him with a bright, almost carefree smile. "Do not wait up for me," Nicole said with a light laugh. "I will be too busy finding myself." Jerome looked at her, nodded once, and stepped back. "Take care of yourself," Jerome said. She leaned in and pressed a quick kiss against his cheek, already half-turned toward the sliding glass doors. He watched her walk away, her heels clicking sharply, her figure swallowed by the moving line of travelers. He did not leave the airport immediately. He parked the sedan, walked back inside, and stood near the observation windows where families clustered to watch planes come and go. He spotted Nicole at a distance, recognized the curve of her shoulders and the outline of her carry-on. She paused near security, glanced at her boarding pass, then slipped off her shoes and stepped through the metal detector. She did not look back. Jerome remained until the plane rolled down the runway and lifted into the low morning clouds. Only when the aircraft disappeared into the pale sky did he turn away, slide his hands into his jacket pockets, and walk back toward the parking garage. By the time Jerome sat behind the wheel again, the plan in his mind had hardened into something simple. She wanted him gone. She wanted a life where he did not exist. He could give her that, just not in the way she imagined. He started the engine. Instead of driving home, he steered the sedan across town to a small real estate office he had passed 100 times and never really seen. Inside, the air smelled like fresh coffee and copier ink. Framed photos of smiling families in front of houses lined the walls. A woman in a navy blazer introduced herself as Madison Caldwell and led him into a glass-walled office. "So, Mr. Harris, you said on the phone you were interested in listing your property," Madison said, opening a folder and clicking a pen. "You mentioned you want to move quickly." Jerome sat across from her, his posture straight. "Yes," Jerome said. "I want the house on Willow Ridge Drive on the market as soon as possible." Madison glanced at the address he had written on the intake form and nodded approvingly. "That neighborhood moves fast," Madison said. "If you sign this listing agreement, I can have a photographer at your property by noon. It will be online by tonight. In this market, we could get a strong offer within days." Jerome rested his rough hands on the paper she slid across the desk. He remembered the first time he had walked through that house with Nicole, their fingers intertwined, her voice echoing in every empty room as she talked about paint colors and dining tables. He remembered carrying drywall and tile samples in the back of his truck, staying up late after shifts to install new cabinets because they could not afford to pay someone else. How quickly can it close if a buyer comes in with cash? Jerome asked. Madison tapped the pen against the margin. "If everything is clean," Madison said, "a week. 2 at most." Jerome nodded. "That is fine," Jerome said. The pen felt heavier than a hammer in his hand, but the stroke of his signature was firm. With each letter of his name, another thread tying him to Nicole's version of their life loosened. "I will take care of the rest," Madison said, gathering the agreement with an efficient smile. "I will call you as soon as we have interest." Jerome thanked her and stepped back out into the sun. The heat pressed against his skin. The decision was no longer just a thought. It had ink and a timeline. He walked to the sedan, opened the door, and paused with one hand on the roof. The interior still smelled faintly of the vanilla air freshener Nicole liked, the one that clung to the fabric. For a moment, old habit tugged at him, whispering that he could still turn back, that he could confront her, demand answers, beg for something different. Then he remembered the sound of her voice saying, "I wish he would just disappear forever," and the hesitation vanished. Instead of driving home, Jerome headed toward the courthouse district. Old brick buildings rose along the street, their stone steps worn smooth by decades of footsteps. The law office of Holt and Lee sat on the corner, its brass plaque shining darkly against the red brick. Inside, the reception area smelled of polish and paper. A receptionist with a polite smile directed him to a small conference room where a man in a charcoal suit sat waiting with a leather folder open in front of him. "Mr. Harris?" the lawyer asked, standing to shake his hand. "I'm Thomas Holt. My assistant said you wanted to discuss a divorce." Jerome sat, his shoulders squared, hands flat on the table. "Yes," Jerome said. "I want to file." Mr. Holt adjusted his glasses and glanced at the intake form. 5 years married, Mr. Holt read. "No children. The house is in your name only." Jerome nodded. "I bought it before we married," Jerome said. "Paid most of it down during the marriage, but the deed stayed in my name." Mr. Holt made a note. "Any other shared assets?" Mr. Holt asked. "Joint business, significant investments?" "No," Jerome said. "Just her car, which is in my name as well." Mr. Holt's pen moved quickly. We can file for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences, Mr. Holt said. It is straightforward. Today, we sign an authorization. I file the petition. She will be served. If she does not contest, this will move quickly. He slid a form across the table. This gives me permission to act on your behalf, Mr. Holt explained. It does not bind you to anything you cannot walk away from today. But once the petition is filed, the process starts. Jerome read each line, lips moving silently as he traced the language. The pen was rough in his fingers, but when he signed, his name pressed into the page with clarity. It felt less like breaking something and more like cutting through rope that had been digging into his wrist for years. We will file this afternoon, Mr. Holt said, tucking the form into the folder. You will receive stamped copies for your records. If she cooperates, this could be finalized soon. Outside, the sky had turned a pale, heavy gray. Jerome walked down the courthouse steps and paused on the sidewalk. People hurried past him. Attorneys carrying briefcases, clerks holding stacks of files, strangers checking their phones. None of them knew that a marriage had just shifted from a private agony into a legal process that would erase it. He took a steady breath, turned, and walked back to the sedan. The silence in the car felt different now. Not empty, but focused. His reflection in the rearview mirror looked back at him, steady and expressionless. The line had been crossed. There would be no return. That afternoon, Jerome drove the sedan to a used car broker on the edge of town. Rows of polished vehicles gleamed under a washed-out sky. A man with a clipboard and oil-stained fingers approached as Jerome parked. Looking to sell? The broker asked. Yes, Jerome said. He handed over a folder. Title, registration, maintenance records. Everything is in order. The man skimmed the documents, then circled the car, tapping the tire tread with his knuckles, running a hand along the paint. He slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and listened as the engine came to life with a smooth hum. Good condition, the broker said. Low enough mileage. I can list it today. When it sells, the funds go straight into the account you put on the form. Jerome's gaze traced the sedan's lines one last time. The faint scuff by the door where Nicole had slammed it in a hurry, the small scratch from a grocery cart. He remembered the night he had surprised her with the car, hiding the keys in a box of chocolates, watching her squeal with delight. That version of her felt like someone from a different life. That will be fine, Jerome said. The broker tucked the folder under his arm. I will call you when it is gone, the broker said. Jerome turned away, the gravel crunching under his work boots, and walked to the old pickup truck he used on job sites. Its seat was ripped, its radio temperamental, but it felt honest in a way the sedan no longer did. That night, the house felt cavernous when Jerome stepped inside. He did not turn on the lights at first. Street lamps outside cast weak patches of glow through the curtains, painting long shadows across the living room. He stood in the center of it, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. Then he sank into his recliner, elbows on his knees, and let the memories arrive. He saw the first apartment in Atlanta with peeling paint and noisy neighbors. The way Nicole had sat on the tiny couch, laughing about how they would tell their children one day that they started with nothing. He saw himself coming home with his hands split and raw, placing his pay envelope in her palm with a sense of pride. He remembered the day they moved into this house in Houston. They had stood in the empty living room, paint samples taped to the wall, Nicole spinning slowly in place with her arms outstretched. This is it, Nicole had said. This is where we really start. He remembered standing in the rain outside a pharmacy, clutching a paper bag of medicine when she had gotten sick, counting out crumpled bills for prescriptions. He remembered taking extra shifts to cover a beach vacation. She said she needed to feel alive again. Each memory, once warm, now burned with the acid of hindsight. Every sacrifice he had made, every splinter, every strained muscle, every hour of overtime had been poured into a foundation she now regarded as a cage. Upstairs, the bedroom smelled faintly of her lotion and hair products. Her side of the closet was full. Dresses in neat rows, shoes lined up perfectly, a jewelry organizer glittering on the dresser. Jerome stood in the doorway and took it in. This was the life she had built on top of his work. She had never wanted to see the scaffolding underneath. He closed his eyes and breathed out slowly. He did not hate her. Anger flickered, yes, but what settled deeper was something quieter, a recognition that the version of him she wanted gone was not the one who existed in front of her now. She had fallen in love with the idea of being rescued from something. He had turned into the something she wanted to be rescued from. The third week arrived with a string of phone calls. Madison's voice came first, bright and efficient, telling him there was a strong cash offer on the house. They saw the listing the first night, Madison said. Walked through the next day. They love it. They want to close in 10 days. Jerome approved the sale without hesitation. The next call came from the broker, saying the sedan had sold and the funds had cleared. Then Mr. Hull called, his tone dry and definite, telling Jerome the divorce paperwork was prepared and ready for him to sign. Jerome drove to the law office, signed where indicated, and left without staying to chat. His name on those pages severed the last formal tie. Back at the house, Jerome stood in the entryway with the keys in his hand and listened to the emptiness. The walls that had once echoed Nicole's laughter now held only faint traces of her voice. He pocketed the keys and climbed the stairs. In the bedroom, her clothes still hung in the closet. Her jewelry still lay in its tray. Her favorite perfume sat on the dresser, the bottle half full. He touched the scarf draped over the back of a chair, let the fabric slide through his fingers, and then placed it gently on the bed. Each object was a piece of the life she believed would be there when she came home, solid and waiting. The next day, Jerome called his oldest friend, a man he had known since middle school in Atlanta, long before Nicole, long before mortgages and airline tickets and betrayal. Tyrone, Jerome said when his friend answered, I need a favor. Tyrone Davis did not ask for details over the phone. Send the address, Tyrone said. I will be there in a few hours. When he arrived, the sun was high and hot. They did not hug at first. They just looked at each other, understanding more in a glance than in a long explanation. You finally done? Tyrone asked quietly. Yeah, Jerome said. I'm done. Together, they walked through the house with flattened cardboard boxes and empty suitcases lined against the hallway wall. Jerome opened the closet and began lifting Nicole's dresses off their hangers. Silk and cotton slid into open luggage. Heels clacked softly as Tyrone lowered them into boxes. You sure you want to do this yourself? Tyrone asked, wrapping a set of perfume bottles in newspaper. You could leave it and let someone else handle it. No, Jerome said. This is the last thing I do for her. After this, everything is hers to manage. They moved through the rooms methodically, collecting cookbooks, decorative candles, picture frames with her in every shot, trinkets she had insisted on buying at boutiques. In the bedroom, Jerome laid an empty suitcase on the bed and unzipped it fully. He walked downstairs to his small desk in the corner of the living room and retrieved a manila envelope from the top drawer. Inside were copies of the finalized divorce papers, each page stamped by the court. He placed the envelope in the suitcase, then added a single handwritten sheet on top. The note read, You wanted me gone. Now you have your wish. There was nothing else, no apology, no insult, no explanation. He closed the suitcase and zipped it shut. When they were finished packing, the house felt hollow, stripped of color and texture. Only neutral walls and empty shelves remained. Jerome carried his own belongings, his tools, a box of old photographs that did not include Nicole, his clothes, his grandmother's quilt, out to the pickup truck. Tyrone loaded the last of Nicole's suitcases and boxes into his own vehicle, stacking them carefully. I will drive these to her parents' place, Tyrone said. You sure you do not want to come? Jerome shook his head. They do not need to hear anything from me, Jerome said. They just need to see what is left. On the porch, Jerome paused with the house key between his fingers. He turned once, looking back at the empty rooms, then closed the door firmly. The lock clicked with a final, sharp sound. Jerome slid the keys to the house into an envelope for Madison and placed it in the mailbox, knowing she would pick them up before closing. Then he climbed into his truck, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb without looking back. At the corner where the road split, Tyrone turned right toward Nicole's parents' neighborhood and Jerome turned left toward the interstate. His plan was simple now. He had already arranged a small rented house in Charlotte, North Carolina, through a company that handled rentals for people relocating for work. The construction firm he worked for had a partner company there. They had been glad to transfer a reliable worker. Hours later, while Jerome's truck ate up miles of highway and the Houston skyline shrank in his rearview mirror, Nicole's plane wheels screeched against the tarmac back in Texas. She leaned her head against the seat, a slow smile spreading across her face. 3 weeks in a beachfront resort in Florida had left her skin warmed by the sun and her phone full of photos she would never show her husband. She had spent mornings by the water, afternoons at spa appointments, evenings on balconies. Marcus had flown in for 4 of those nights, meeting her for dinners and slipping up to her room after midnight. In quiet moments, she imagined telling Jerome she needed more space, then easing herself fully into Marcus's world. The cab ride from the airport back to her neighborhood moved lazily through late afternoon traffic. Nicole sat in the back seat, scrolling through her messages. Marcus had sent a single text that morning. "Let me know when you are back," he had written. "I want to see you again soon." She had reread it 3 times, telling herself it meant something concrete. As the cab turned into her familiar street, she sat up, already forming sentences in her mind about needing more time to think about the marriage. Her thoughts shattered when she saw the house. A dark blue SUV sat in the driveway where her sedan used to be. The blinds at the front window were different, lighter, a pale gray instead of the heavy curtains she had chosen. Fresh flowers bloomed in neat beds along the front walk. For a moment, she wondered if she had given the driver the wrong address. "Stop here," Nicole said sharply, leaning forward. The cab had barely halted when she thrust cash at the driver and dragged her suitcase out onto the sidewalk. Her key felt cold and comforting in her hand as she marched up the porch steps and shoved it into the lock. The key would not turn. She tried again, harder, her breath catching. The metal scraped uselessly against the cylinder. The lock had been changed. Inside, a child's laughter rang out, high and bright. Nicole pounded her fist against the door. "Jerome!" Nicole shouted. "Jerome, open the door." Footsteps approached on the other side. The knob turned, and the door opened not to Jerome, but to a woman Nicole had never seen before, holding a baby on her hip. The woman's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her tone polite but cautious. Nicole blinked at her, the world tilting. "This is my house," Nicole said, voice cracking. "You are my house." The baby stared at her curiously, then buried his face in the woman's shoulder. The woman shook her head slowly. "No, it is not," the woman replied. "We just bought this place. Closed 3 days ago. The previous owner moved out last week." Nicole staggered back a step, the handle of her suitcase biting into her palm. "That is not possible," Nicole whispered. "My husband," she broke off, fumbling in her bag for her phone. She dialed Jerome's number with trembling fingers. The call rang once, then flipped to an automated voice informing her the number was no longer in service. She tried again, faster this time, but reached the same message. Panic thudded against her ribs. She scrolled to her parent contact and hit call. Her mother answered on the first ring. "Nicole," her mother said, exhaling sharply. "Thank goodness. We have been trying to reach you." "There are strangers in my house," Nicole whispered. "My key does not work. Where is Jerome? What is going on?" Her mother paused. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Come here," her mother said. "Come to the house. We will show you what he left." The line went dead. Nicole lowered the phone slowly, her mind spinning. The woman at the door shifted the baby and stepped back. "I am sorry," the woman said gently. "We really did buy this house. We have the papers. If you need to see them, no," Nicole said quickly, backing away. "No, I need to go." She dragged her suitcase down the walkway, each bump over the concrete jarring her bones. She waved down another cab at the corner, gave the driver her parents' address in a hollow voice, and sank back against the seat. Houses, storefronts, trees slid past in a blur of color and light. Silent tears carved tracks through the powder on her cheeks. Her parents stood waiting at the front door when the cab pulled up. Her father, Harold Miller, had one hand on the frame, his jaw set. Her mother, Patricia, clutched a dish towel in fingers that trembled. Nicole hauled her suitcase up the short path, her throat tight. "What is happening?" Nicole demanded as soon as she reached them. "Where's Jerome? Why can I not get into my house?" Inside, Harold said quietly, "You need to see for yourself." The smell of coffee and lemon cleaner wrapped around her as she stepped over the threshold. The familiarity of her childhood home did nothing to steady her. They led her down the hallway without another word. Their silence was heavier than anger, heavier than consolation. Patricia opened the door to the guest room and stepped aside. Nicole's feet stopped moving. Her luggage, was stacked in neat rows against the wall. The suitcases she recognized from her closet sat beside cardboard boxes labeled in Jerome's precise handwriting: shoes, dresses, bathroom, books. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser. Perfume bottles were wrapped in newspaper and tucked into an open carton. Framed photographs had been removed from their frames, the prints gathered in a large envelope. "What is this?" Nicole whispered. "Why is all my stuff here?" Harold did not answer. He simply nodded at the largest suitcase, the one resting closest to the bed. "Open it," Harold said. Nicole stumbled forward, dropped her knees on the carpet, and yanked at the zipper with shaking hands. Inside, her clothes were folded tightly, pressed together, the faint scent of lavender clinging to the fabric. On top of the stack sat a manila envelope. Her name was written on the front in Jerome's handwriting. She tore it open. The divorce papers slid into her lap, page after page stamped and signed. The date at the top told her everything had been put in motion weeks ago. His name appeared in clean, deliberate strokes wherever a signature was required. Her eyes scanned phrases, irreconcilable differences, respondent, marital home solely in petitioner's name, without fully absorbing them. Lying on top of the documents was a single sheet of line paper with 6 words written in the same firm handwriting. "You wanted me gone. Now you have your wish." For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then a raw sound tore itself out of Nicole's chest, a scream that did not sound like it belonged to her. It ripped through the quiet house, rattling the framed pictures in the hallway. She clutched the note in both hands, pressing it against her chest as if she could force time to reverse by squeezing hard enough. The papers slid from her lap and scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Ink glared up at her. She saw her own name as respondent, and somehow that word hurt as much as the sentence Jerome had written. Nicole's body shook with sobs. Her mother moved forward, instinctively reaching out, but Harold lifted a hand to stop her. They stood in the doorway together, watching their daughter collapse beside the open suitcase. The woman who had once bragged to Patricia about how Jerome would do anything for her now knelt among boxes that proved he had finally done the one thing she never imagined. He had left completely. Every piece of stability she had taken for granted had vanished while she lounged on rented lounge chairs under a Florida sun, wishing for his absence. Images flashed through Nicole's mind, bright and cruel. The day Jerome had surprised her with the sedan, his face lit with nervous excitement. The night he had stayed up with her when she had a fever, refreshing a cold cloth for her forehead over and over until dawn. The time he carried her on his back through ankle-deep water when a storm had flooded their street in Atlanta. She had taken those moments and stacked them up without gratitude, convinced they were the bare minimum of what she deserved. Now, all that remained of them were folded clothes and stamped papers. "He sold the house," Harold said quietly from the doorway. "The new owners moved in a few days ago. He left a message with us when he dropped your things off. He said you would understand when you saw." Nicole lifted her head slowly, tears streaking her face. "Where is he?" Nicole asked, her voice shredded. "Where did he go?" Patricia swallowed. "We do not know," Patricia said. "He only said he needed a fresh start somewhere else. He said he would be all right. He said this is what you wanted." Nicole's fingers tightened around the note until the paper crumpled. She looked around the small guest room, at the suitcases that now held every tangible piece of the life she had assumed would be waiting for her. The clothes, the perfume, the shoes, the photographs, all compressed in a luggage like items someone had recovered from a storage unit. The house she had called hers belonged to strangers. The car she had driven sat on another lot under another sky. The husband she had dismissed as small had disappeared so thoroughly that even his phone number had become a deadline. All that he had left behind was exactly what she had demanded of the universe: his absence. Nicole's sobs slowed into ragged breaths. She lowered the note and stared at the words again. "You wanted me gone. Now you have your wish." There were no insults in the sentence, no accusations, no cruel flourishes. It was simply a statement of fact. He had not argued with her. He had not begged. He had not confronted her with the details of her affair. He had taken her wish at face value and rebuilt his life around it, brick by brick, signature by signature. In that moment, sitting on the floor with her knees drawn up and divorce papers scattered around her, Nicole understood that some losses are not accidents or tragedies that happen out of nowhere. Some losses arrive as the exact bill for words spoken in comfortable rooms when you think the person you are talking about will never hear them. She had asked for a world where Jerome did not exist. Now she had it. The house was gone. The marriage was over. The safety net she had mocked as a burden had been cut away. In another city, hours down the highway, Jerome sat on the small porch of a rented house on the outskirts of Charlotte. The evening air was cooler there. He could hear the distant hum of traffic and the closer sounds of children playing on a nearby lawn. His work boots were off, resting beside his chair. His hands, for once, were still. There were no keys in his pocket that tied him to anyone else's expectations. His phone lay on the small table beside him, a local number glowing on the screen. No missed calls, no unanswered messages. He took a slow breath and let it out. Jerome did not know that at that same moment, Nicole was kneeling beside a suitcase in her parents' guest room, screaming into the soft air of the house. He did not know which memory was breaking her most sharply. He only knew that he had given her exactly what she had said she wanted. He had disappeared from her life. He had taken his presence, the one that irritated her so much she wished it gone, and removed it completely. The rest, the weight of that absence, the shock, the loneliness, was hers to carry now. He had carried enough. Back in Houston, Nicole gathered the scattered papers with shaking hands, pressing them back into the envelope as if the act could slow the process they described. It cannot. The signatures were in place. The court had already stamped the documents. The house had new owners. The locks had been changed. Her luggage stood patiently by the wall, a row of mute witnesses to the life she had lost. She sank back against the side of the bed, the note still between her fingers, and finally understood that the wish she had whispered into a phone had not just been heard. It had been granted completely and without mercy. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.